Hello, my fellow introverts. Stacy here, your programming and test automation expert. One of you guys asked me to make a video about custom exceptions in Python. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to discuss how, when, and why you should use custom exceptions in Python. There are many opinions about this over the internet. I checked it over before doing the video, and you will find some battles on Stack Overflow whether you have to use custom exceptions or you shouldn't. So let's try to discuss it today. We'll see some examples where you might want to use custom exception, and we will start in a moment. But before that, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and check the links in the description. There you will find some useful links about today's video code, some information about custom exceptions, as well as a link to Help for Ukraine. I remind you that me and my friends are gathering some help, so if you would like to contribute, we will be very, very helpful for any contribution. So now, let's get on with it. So folks, let's start with defining our first custom exception and see how it's done in Python. First thing that you are going to need is a class. So each exception is a class, and this is what we need to do in order to create our own custom exception. So let's create a class. I will call it my awesome exception. And let's leave it empty for now, right? So we can try to raise it. And Python is very smart, and it's going to tell us that we actually done something incorrectly because it says exceptions must derive from base exceptions. If you remember our previous videos, I told you that each error and exception in Python derives from base exception. So our custom class is no exception, pun intended, and we have to actually derive from base exception. You might not do this directly, but in the end, finally, you have to actually derive from base exception. So this means that you can actually pick an exception you want to derive from. So you can pick type error, not implemented error, anything you want. It might be a custom error from a framework, anything, and you just derive from it, because at the end, it always derives from base exception. This is what we're going to do. Let's derive from just exception. And let's try it again. Okay, we look better, but one thing that is missing, I would like to have a message here. So can we just provide a message as for regular Python exception? Let's try it out. So let's put a message here. My awesome exception message. Seems to work. We get our message. And of course, another thing that would be good to have is to actually be able to have a default message for our exception. So to do that, we have to remember about the str magic method. So let's do that. We will do str return. And this is going to be our default error message. Okay. So, seems to work, but there is one problem, because we are no longer seeing our message that we have provided. Because there might be a situation that, well, you have your own exception, but you still want to provide a custom message for your custom exception. There might be different situations. So basically, it would be good to be able to pick whether we have provided it and we want to show it, or we haven't provided it and we just show the default one. So let's first check whether if I remove this guy, we will see this still. Yes, so we see our default message, and this means that we have to handle whether to take what we have provided with the class instance or just the default one. So to do that is going to be very simple and very object-oriented. We will need an init. So we can do a super, but it actually wouldn't do much, I presume. And then we have to actually create an instance attribute. Let's call it MSG. And now we will need to pass the MSG along with instance creation, and we will put it here. And of course, it can be none because we don't want to require this one. So let's try it out. Let's give a message. Oh, and we of course have to check whether it's given or not here in the str magic method. So if self msg, then we return self msg. If not, then we return the default one. Okay, we have our customer message, and if we remove it, we will get the default one. Okay, so it starts to look pretty much fine, but there is one small thing that actually disturbs me, is this main at the beginning. So this main is actually saying that we are raising the exception from the current script, and actually to be able to fix this, you have to define module. Well, it's not a magic method, but it's a magic class attribute. And we are going to set it to something. If you set it to, for example, exception, then you will see exception here, right? So we can put, let's say, custom here. You will see custom here. So you get the idea. Basically, if you want to, you can set the module, and then you will see that, well, this exception is coming from this particular module. But if you want to just get rid of it, which might be the case, then you would do built-ins here. And now it will behave the same way as the built-in exception, and you will not see this first part here before the dot. Okay, so now looks pretty much fine. My awesome exception, my definitely awesome error message. Now, let's discuss how you can actually use custom exceptions. Why can they be useful for you? So, first, very simple thing is that this is a class. So you can actually add your stuff into this class, and you can add some functionality, like some additional functionality for this class. So let's presume that you are handling an HTTP error. Let's go ahead and implement something like this. So let's say we have a not found error, right? And we of course derive it from, let's say, exception. And let's do an init. Let's put a message here, just as we did before. We'll do self message, right? And we'll do str if self message return self message, and otherwise return not found HTTP error. Yeah, probably a stupid message, but you get the idea. So let's try to raise it, right? And we will see, oh, okay, yeah, we forgot to make this one. So we will see not found HTTP error. Yeah, we can of course add the module here as well, just to not see that one. Okay. So first thing that you can actually do for such an error, you could add some additional functionality. For example, you can set a status code. You know, you have some server, and if something happens, if something is not found, then you can just raise this exception, and there's going to be a handler that's going to receive this exception and basically form a response from it, right? To reply to the client. And of course, the client is going to accept a status code from the server. So you can actually pack the status code inside of this exception so that when the handler gets this exception, you will be able to form the response automatically. So let's try to do this. We would do self dot status code equals 404. Now we can actually do a try except. And let's make it very generic, because if we're writing some generic handler for anything that happens in your server, then we can just do accept exception as E. This is this very rare case where you might want to do something like this. We will speak about this a bit more in a moment, but let's just make it as generic as we can for now. So we will make an accept exception, and well, presumably here you create an error response for the client. Okay, let's assume this. Let's do just a print to see what is inside of the E, and we can do now E dot and here you go. We have a 404. Of course, PyCharm is now not very happy because we're just doing accept exception as E. So this is very generic, and PyCharm wouldn't know that we actually have a status code because the regular exception doesn't have the status code. But in our case, we know that this is a handler for different errors, and we can actually handle it this way. Which leads us to another thought. We can actually verify what type of exception this is. We don't have to verify the error message, which would be very painful to do that, because with exceptions you can actually specify an error message here as well, right? So just remember about this. Well, of course, if we have implemented it this way, it would be very inconvenient to check the error message, to compare strings, and determine what type of error this is based on the str of this exception, right? So we can actually check the type. So we could do something like this. If type E is not in. Sorry, not in. Not in. We could do print 500, right? And otherwise, we do E status code. Okay, so now we will get 404 because we are raising not found here. But if we get something like, I don't know, 7 divided by 0, right? Something unexpected, we will get a 500. So you get the idea. This is how some servers work inside. So you get a generic handler. Of course, you don't have to do this in most cases by yourself, because if you're using Flask or Django or FastAPI, you would not need to do this. It is going to be handled by the framework. But in general, inside of those frameworks, something similar is happening. You can also extend this guy and do something like this. You would create a class, custom HTTP error, derive it from exception, let's say, and make it a pass, right? And then we can derive our exceptions from custom HTTP errors, right? And now, instead of checking not in, not found, I don't know, not authorized, etc., you can just check whether the object that we're getting inside of the E is derived from our custom HTTP error. And the actual if is going to be much easier than it looks like right now. And instead of checking not in, not found, we would do something like this. If is subclass type E, our custom HTTP error, then we do print status code, else we print 500. Okay, let's check it out. 500 because we do something like this. Well, actually, we shouldn't raise, we just should do something like this. We will get 500. And now we can check whether it's going to work if we raise and not found error, not found error. 404. So you get the idea. This is perfectly all right to use custom exceptions in this case. And one additional thing is that you will be able to understand when you create your custom errors that this is a business-like exception and this is something that you are prepared for. So this is not coming from an unexpected error. For such handler, if you get a 500, this means that there is some code that you haven't covered with your custom exceptions, and probably you have to check it out because this is something unexpected. Something that you didn't expect, didn't handle, it has to draw your attention and you have to investigate. So this is also another thing that is very cool about custom exceptions, that you can distinguish between the built-in errors from Python, meaning that you were not prepared for them, and the ones that you have defined. So probably in some situations you want to go this direction. Okay guys, let's take a look at the real world example with FastAPI. So we have a very simple FastAPI application with only one endpoint, which is called restricted area. So let's presume that we have some kind of an application and you have a restricted area which can be accessed only by admins, right? And when you're trying to access it, you will have to stupidly pass the user type in the query string. Well, I know this is stupid, but this is just done for simplicity for this example. Anyway, we're checking whether the user type is an admin, and then if it's not an admin, then we're raising our custom exception, which looks this way. As you can see, we're doing the same stuff we did before, but there is one more thing which is very cool, is that we can actually tell that when raising this exception, you have to provide some additional information. Not only the message, but you have to provide, for example, the user, like the user type in this case. So as you can see, here I'm providing the user. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to raise this exception. So basically, this is pretty cool because you can just provide some information, use it somehow inside of the exception, and once you're handling the exception, you can also access this information because you can store it this way and then use it in an error message or in any other way that you want. So what we are actually doing, FastAPI has something like app execution handler, where you can specify the type of exception which the handler will react to. So as you can see, this is the second case where we actually react to the type of the exception. So this is quite similar to what we have seen in the previous example. There we just implemented our own handler for different HTTP errors, and here in FastAPI you already have one. But anyway, we are describing our business case here, and we can say that in case of the restricted exception, we would like to reply with JSON response. We'll set the status code to 401 unauthorized, and then we'll give some message. So let's try it out. First of all, I will just run it. And now let's go to the browser. Right, is this the one? Yes, this is the one. And we will have restricted area, right? And user type, let's say admin first. And we see some content restricted stuff. So this is basically what we're expecting. So for admin, it's going to work. But if we specify, let's say, a sorcerer, we get, stop right there, criminals come. Sorcerers don't have access. So as you can see, this is a business case, so we have implemented the logic where we have to fail. If something else happens and we get a 500, then we will see that this is something that we didn't expect, and we will have to take a look into this. So folks, let's sum up today's video. I know this is not everything that you can say about custom exceptions, so if you lack any information, please let me know in the comments as you did before. As you can see, I'm trying to address them as soon as possible, but we have to sum up today's video. What have we learned today? Custom exceptions are very useful for business applications, servers, probably testing frameworks, and what is very cool is that you can actually distinguish between something happening because some particular conditions were met in your code and something that is not expected and happened without your intervention. And this second something signifies that you have to actually go there and check it out. Second benefit is, of course, that you can provide some additional stuff along with exception. So, for example, we did it with the status code. And of course, you can also restrict what you have to give along with the creation of this exception object. FastAPI example, where we have to provide the user type, otherwise we wouldn't be able to raise this exception. So, I believe these are the most common cases where you can use it. Probably you shouldn't use custom exceptions everywhere for simple cases which are already covered by Python exceptions. Anyway, let me know what you think about this video, if you agree with this or not. Anyway, this is just an opinion and some experience of mine. Really curious where you are using custom exceptions. And this is it for today. So I thank you for your attention. I wish you a very happy coding, and I will see you in 1 week. There is one small thing that actually disturbed me. Conclusions. These are the probable confusions.